Welcome to Tramlines, a podcast from Agri. I'm your host, Tony Smith, putting your questions to the experts. Today we're taking a look back at some of the most popular episodes in the past year, listening to some of the great advice shared by our expert contributors, helping us navigate through a very challenging year in farming. Let's start by visiting a very popular podcast, Taking Action with the latest updates to SFI 2024 with Agri's Alex Ollivant and Dan Wood. And I asked them, where do farmers start and how do they build on what they've already been doing with regards to SFI?
I think the first thing and the key message is to look at your sort of 3-4 year plan, that you've got in place already, roughly where you're cropping and what you're doing, and then pick the options that work around what you're already doing. You always see people who go chasing after the highest paying option or action rather, where that can then have implications further on down the line. Picking those rotational options. The key thing with the precision farming one that we've mentioned, the variable rate application, is that it is rotational. So you can move it around and follow a rotation. The same one is with soil sampling. If you're not already in an SFI and you're looking to go into it, if you're having any soil sampling done, just get it with an organic matter on it, and then you're just future-proofing yourself rather than having that expense of going out again in a year's time and collecting another bit of soil from that same field that you did 12 months ago. So those are the two key things I'd say.
And for those farmers that are listening, thinking, well, this could cost me money to gear up and be in the right place. Does it have to be expensive to take, particularly if we're thinking about your world, precision farming, to really start to take that next step?
It can be, as with anything in life. You can go a simple option, cheap and cheerful, or you can have all the bells and whistles, associated costs. I mean, from my previous life working in precision technology in the machinery market, I know there's an awful lot of equipment out there which is capable of doing it, capable of doing the precision farming tasks, but the farmer, for whatever reason, isn't using it for that, whether it's a tractor that's got auto steer but they haven't got a fertilizer spinner capable of variable rate, or they might have a fertilizer spinner that's capable of doing it but they bought it for an alternative reason, such as the section control and not overlapping and double spreading. So a lot of people have, if not all of the kit, half the kit to do the job already. So sometimes it can be as simple as an unlock or a bit of education on how to do something with existing equipment.
In terms of helping farmers, simplify this world of having to record everything on the farms to be able to have that evidence. You've talked about Contour a few times. How does that help the farmer?
Well, so it's documentation is the key word. They've got all their soil information, all their organic matter testing, zonal testing, everything like that, all in one place. And from the variable rate applications that we're doing, and creating nutrient management plans, nutrient plans, all their nutrient data is there, so we can easily run off those reports, tied in with the app and noting those locations and evidencing everything that you're doing. So whether it's as we said, digging a soil pit, drilling a flower margin, noting the day it was done, that it's flowered by a certain date, any of those evidences can be recorded.
How does a farmer start to work their way through understanding the detail? And some of the detail has changed, which is really quite significant. Where's the best place to go to seek that understanding?
Well, I always start with the search engine, shall we say. I always use that, type in SFI 2024 and see what pops up. But the best place is obviously to go to a government website. Like I say, I think it's called the Funding for Farmers or something along those lines. And it literally, you could type in any option. It has everything listed on there. At the minute, each option has its own page, which you can get lost down a little bit of a rabbit warren trying to find out what you need. But we're hoping that, like the old scheme, it did end up in a publication booklet that was renewed online every now and again. So we're hoping that we get a similar thing for the 2024 scheme.
And of course, what I'm hearing is that these actions are very specific to each farm business. So I guess that on-farm advice is really important here, Alex, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Everything, there's not a one size fits all at all. So I always kind of start by going in on farm saying that you've clearly got some bits, every farm does, some bits that you don't want to farm, whether they're a soggy field corner or whether it's somewhere that is just awkward to get to, the field's not big enough to get your machinery in, the gateways aren't big enough to get machinery in, whatever. So let's reduce that risk, let's reduce the time, let's increase your efficiency, take out the bad bits, put it into a risk-free or relatively risk-free option with the SFI, something that works in that particular area. At the end of the day, and again, something Dan hinted at, you've got to make the scheme work for you and you not work for the scheme.
Our next episode was all about leadership in our industry. Seeds of Influence exploring leadership in agriculture with Christine Tacon. I asked her some key questions about what is required of our leaders and what does that mean as we look to the future.
I would say we need really quite a different style of leadership. We need to recognise that we've got to have much more variety of thought. We need to be encouraging people of very, very different backgrounds into our industry. We don't have the diversity of thought in our industry that we need, and we've got a massive issue. You know, the climate is a massive issue. It's affecting everything about, you know, everything this year in terms of all of our crops, but it affects how the public feel about what we do. We've got to think on a much broader basis, get more thinking in, get more ideas in. And I think one of the areas that I do worry about is that we all feel that it's important to lobby DEFRA and get DEFRA to change. And you think, actually, we should be working together as an industry. We should be sorting out our differences between ourselves, and we should be going to DEFRA as a united industry saying, this is what you need to do. Because DEFRA are being pulled in so many different directions, and we think, oh, well, we need to lobby them about this, but then they're also being lobbied by consumers about something else and by a different government department about something else. And I think we need to resolve many more of our things, and we need government to interfere less, but we need to advise government how we want them to interfere. So I think that's a massive change in how we do things, and I think we need the organizations within agriculture need to be leading in the right direction. And I think that it's, you know, we are getting into this area where we're being sort of populist and responding to what we think those people working in our industry want, whereas we've got to actually help bring in the external thoughts and take the industry where it needs to go.
So does that mean that the modern leader needs to be very good at influencing?
I think yes, but it's the best influencers are the people that really understand. So you've got to not only think this is where we all need to go, but understand where everybody's coming from and how we're going to get there, and listen to what they're saying and maybe amend where we think we're going as well. And I sort of can't help but think about sort of red tractor there, that, you know, we're trying to think about where things need to go, but we hadn't thought enough about where everybody was, and to then listen to them and to think, well, maybe I'm not completely right here, and I need to listen to what they're saying and amend where it is we need to go, but to still be leading.
Next up, we recorded live at Readyhedge near Pershore with agri-horticultural agronomists Jason Steels, Jonathan Garrett and Matt Greep, and growers Simon and Toby Williamson. Learning about the horticultural production techniques and asking what we can learn from growing these high-value crops. And Matt, let's come to you, because you're the horticulturalist here from Agri. So what are the challenges from your point of view in terms of, you know, keeping an eye on this crop and advising on the best way of looking after it?
When I first started walking here at Readyhedge, we had a whole mix of issues that were rearing their head year on year, things like powdery mildew, certain aphids and scale insect pests. The biggest challenge, as Toby's just said, is because this is an ornamental crop and we're selling everything from the roots, the bark, the stalk, the leaves intact, it all has to look pristine. So we have no tolerance for any pest attack whatsoever. If we see it, we need to react very quickly, and we actually have a sort of prophylactic program in place to try and foresee any disease and pest issues that might come in. So we start our program very early in the spring, we continue that right through the growing season, and then we assess the damage, if there is any, at the end of the year in preparation for the following year. As the majority of the hedge plants are 2-year crops, if we allow anything to overwinter into the following spring, that problem can be worse. So it's really thinking ahead, overcoming what challenges might come into the crop, and then using all of the armoury that we have to our hands in an IPM matter to treat the crops as best we can.
Sure, so let's pick up on that IPM and understand a bit about how you use that and what that means here in this production system. Let's come to you, Jason. I know you've come across from Lincolnshire today. Thanks ever so much for that. So tell me a bit about how important is IPM in the production of plants like this?
Massively now, because it's part of UK law under the Sustainable Use Directive. Growers have to show they are actively using IPM principles in order to grow a crop. So they have to follow the IPM pyramid, which starts off as your cultural controls, which is your first line of defence, being nice, tidy, clean, sterilising, and just general good practices around the nursery. Moving on up to your physical methods, be it irrigation systems and a whole host of machinery on the nursery. Moving up to your bios, which includes biopesticides and also your macrobiologicals, which are your little bugs running around using nature to eat nature. And then finally, the very last step is you break out the can of chemical to control it. That's the short of it.
To listen to these and other episodes of Tramlines throughout the season, visit agri.co.uk/tramlines-podcast. We also recorded live from Cereals 2024 at Newnham Farm in Hertfordshire for the first time. We talked to AgriSeed Technical Manager John Miles and joined by Agri's Gavin Taylor and Rob Stewart. The episode explored what the key learnings had been during the course of a challenging year and how growers can make the most of these findings to prepare for autumn sowing and build resilience into their farming systems. So, John, in terms of that planning and getting things right, it's not just about seed, is it? Here we are in Hertfordshire, blackgrass country for many farmers here. What else do we really need to consider and get right?
So for me, the key considerations around moving to this autumn are, as you mentioned, the traffic light system, which we've talked for many years around in terms of grass weeds. What is green, what is continuous normal, what is amber, need to modify our practices, and what is red, drastically change our practices. We'll probably have the same sort of traffic light system for soil structure, large amounts of rainfall, trafficking in wet conditions, mauling things in, a lot of structural problems out there to try and rectify. So actually some fields will be easily trafficable and continue on and drilled again. Others might need some serious work. So I think we've got to think about how that plays out, and then that will affect our cropping plans and then the variety. And we've in our variety tours this year, we are basing our discussions around the blue chart, which is a part of our agri advisory list. And in here, it's an indicative graphic showing the logical sequence of varieties that you should drill. Not necessarily based on yield potential, but based on things like, everything you need for standing, for disease resistance, for grain quality. So some of those varieties that you'd want to start drilling with may be on farm in bags still, but that's possibly quite unlikely because they would have got drilled early and maybe lost. So that might be what you need to go to the market to buy, or indeed have on farm if you're lucky enough. And then obviously moving on, there's a big tranche of varieties for later drilling. So I think the key thing is it's drilling the right variety in the right place. That's probably what we're trying to initiate. And then thinking, as you say, where are we going to get that seed? Do you need to go to the market for it, or can we get it through Farm Safe Seed?
How does that farmer make that decision between certified and farm safe seed?
I think ultimately it's an easy decision to make if you're comfortable and capable to deal with farm safe seed. It's an easy decision to make if you've got that variety already on farm, and if it's in good condition, there is no benefit to moving away from farm saving it. It's when you, as John says, it's when we're looking at situations where you might need a change. Just because it's been a bad year, it doesn't necessarily mean you need to change your variety.
John, what's the importance and role of these seed treatments, and why is that so important this year?
Establishment is key, and people might want to try and drill a bit earlier next year, and some of those conditions might not be that favourable. So, you need to look at anything that can help establish a strong young plant, and certainly for us, seed treatments, fulfil that role.
And for this review of recent popular episodes, we go to the episode entitled Should I Grow Oilseed Rape? Speaking with Agri's David Leeper, Seed Technical Specialist, and Tim Horton, Technical Manager for Combinable Crops. So what if a farmer thinks, I don't want to venture back to oilseed rape? What are the alternatives, David?
It's fair to say that the choices for the arable farmer are somewhat limited in the UK. Of course, we have field beans. On some farms, maize has been introduced into the rotation where there's either a livestock or an AD opportunity, and winter linseed is very limited. So what choices farmers have got on heavy land particularly are limited. So oilseed rape does offer an opportunity. The other choices, and as we are seeing at the moment, farmers are considering some of the SFI options, and for example, taking a break into a rotational legume fallow. It's an opportunity which we haven't had before, and I'm sure many farmers are going to move that way. On lighter land, of course, we've always historically had more opportunities with spring pulses and with spring barley, and indeed increasingly on heavy land we've seen a big uptake on spring barley in spite of the crop having establishment problems in a year like this.
And so to bring all of your advice together, as we always do as we come towards the end of a podcast, Tim, what are the key elements that you would urge growers to think about in terms of considering oilseed rape, but also what they need to get right?
Key starting point has to be the establishment phase, making use of the conditions, setting things up for success, and making sure you've got the best chance of getting a good crop established using the weather and the soil conditions at the time. That has to be the starting point. The elements you add to that would be things like the nutrition, so seedbed fertilizers placed if possible, or using some like organic manures. Can also help with like chicken muck or sewage cake, also can be beneficial. Those with a companion crop give you the best chance of success to set the crop up. Early weed control is going to be beneficial, reducing the complications later on and giving you the best chance of growing a good crop. So the establishment phase is key to oilseed rape, but you've got to make sure that you're putting the right things in the right situations for success.
And David, what would be your advice to those who are listening today?
Well, I think many of you listening will have had your fingers burnt with oilseed rape. It's a crop which is a high-risk crop. Flea beetle, weather conditions, disease, poor harvest conditions are all having an impact. I think the message for me would have an open mind. There is still profitability. There is still a place from oilseed rape. For those of you who are growing it well, stick with it. For those of you who are questioning whether it has value, maybe consider it an opportunistic approach. If the conditions are good, go for it. Maybe select a variety that's protected by a risk share scheme. And if it doesn't establish, you've got the opportunity to then go into a later drilled wheat crop or indeed into the spring. So I think the value that oilseed rape brings to the acreage is well understood. It's about managing and reducing the risk.
Thank you to all our contributors in 2024 for sharing their experience, advice and top tips. That's it for this podcast, but do tune in again as we meet the experts throughout the season, exploring the many immediate and longer-term questions for growers and farmers in the UK. If you have any questions that you would like us to ask the experts, email info@agri.co.uk. See you next time.